So we've been looking at this obscure story in the Old Testament about a man who goes down into a pit with a lion on a snowy day and kills the lion. You might think, well, what in the world does that have to do with me today? What can I learn spiritually from this? But we've seen there's actually quite a bit when you ask the right questions. And the first question is why? Why did Benaiah go down into that pit to kill the lion? And we saw from everything that he did it to protect anyone else who might fall into that pit with the lion. And so the lesson for us is, the spiritual lion is Satan. He's seeking someone to devour all the time. And we need to not only be on guard ourselves, but help protect others from that. Well, what are the dangers? That's what we asked next. It was pretty clear, in Benaiah's case. But for us, there can be different dangers that people face. And so we looked at those last time. We said it can be the pull of our sinful nature that we have as Christians, or the allure of the world of walking by sight versus faith. The false worldview of believing there is no God, or believing there's a God and still denying absolutes. So a lot of Christians, can fall into that. The false worldview of thinking we relate to God based on our works versus grace, and then discouragement, being just feeling hopeless. And so since those are what the dangers are, they tell us then, okay, here's how I need to face those, how I need to protect people. And I'll work backwards. We'll start with discouragement. And just the very name says the way that I need to protect people then is to encourage them. The problem, though, is we don't know what that means. We've watered down encouragement to have a nice day. We think that's encouragement. No, the very word, what's it sound like? Encouraged, bolster the courage of someone to live this Christian life, because it can be so discouraging. Paul in Romans 1 says, and he's talking to the Christians in Rome that he's never been there personally. He says, I long to see you that we may be mutually encouraged by each other's faith, both yours and mine. He says, I want to get there so we can encourage one another. Do you think he's saying, I want to get to Rome so that when I do, you can say, hey, Paul, have a nice day. And I can say to you, have a nice day. And that'll be enough to get me through all the things I face, the beatings, the jailings, the stone, all of that. If you just say, have a nice day. That's ridiculous. And even what he says here, be encouraged by each other's faith. What he's saying is, I want to hear the things that have tested your faith. I want to hear then about the faith that you've had and how God has worked. That's what's going to encourage me. And I'm going to tell you the same things from my life so I can encourage you. That's what it is. So when we see someone who's discouraged, we need to, the word means walk alongside them. Do what it takes in whatever way they're potentially discouraged and want to give up to some degree or at all on God. I encourage them to continue in their walk with God, and I help them in doing that. Well, then if the problem is some false view, a worldview or a word view, then I need to share the truth with them, right? I need to teach them that. It says in Colossians, let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, teaching and admonishing one another in all wisdom. You may not have the official position teacher, but we can all teach. We can all tell someone, here's the truth. And it says then for that to happen, it needs to dwell in us richly. We need to know it so that we can then teach someone else. We can tell them, here's what it is. Here's the evidence for God. Here's the implication about absolutes. Here's the nature of grace versus this tendency mankind's always had to relate to God, try to, based on works. I need to do what it takes to teach them and admonish them. There's a warning element there, an urging, hey, come on, this is serious. And we know that as well. We teach the implications. We go through Galatians about here's what can happen when you fall away from grace and relate to God based on works. And then, the sinful nature in the world. If someone gets caught in that, if Satan has used that and pulled them away, well, then I need to seek to restore them. Galatians 6 says, if someone is caught in a sin, you who live by the Spirit should restore that person gently. They're caught in it. They're caught up in it. Satan has been successful at getting them caught up. And then I need to restore them. I need to, confront them, share that truth with them. But it says gently. There's an attitude that's going to work versus one that won't. Speak the truth in love. I need to be willing to do that And then, of course, as we talk about any spiritual problem and any spiritual danger, of course, I've got to pray. Ephesians says in chapter 6, verse 18, pray in the Spirit on all occasions with all kinds of prayers and requests. With this in mind, be alert and always keep on praying for all the Lord's people. Pray for each other in general, and then definitely if I see a specific problem, a specific danger, a specific attack by Satan, pray for that person and what's going on there. Pray like their life depends on it, because you know what? It does. We saw that Satan is trying to devour people. These are eternal dangers. Could separate them eternally from God. I've got to face them all and react to them that way. I've got to, and that's why this story, the lesson in the how, the specifics, but how in general, I've got to be willing to go down into the pit. It's interesting. Benaiah didn't stand on the edge and throw a spear, and maybe the reason is that story about the Egyptians says he used a club. That got him down in the pit. And definitely the lesson for us is, I've got to be willing to do whatever it takes. If I don't know the truth about some of these false worldviews, I've got to put forth the effort to find out. If someone's caught up in things, I've got to have that difficult conversation that has an element of confrontation. Speak the truth. I've got to do it in love. Sometimes that's the difficult part. If they're discouraged, I've got to encourage them in whatever way it takes. Be willing to take those midnight phone calls. Whatever it is, make it clear and do it and live it out. And that's how I protect someone. Well, the last thing we're going to look at is who. And, there's an element of whoever needs it, but there's some specifics here as well that I think are pretty important. So we're going to look at that next time. Follow the action steps, study those, apply those, and tag 2 when you share this video. Thanks.